So a few years ago, my brother Euan messaged me to say that a few friends, ex-colleagues of his, were coming up from London, and did I want to meet him and them for a drink that evening. Pretty simple question. Small challenge. Euan had recently become a manual chair user. So I said to Euan, sure, but where are we going to go? And at that time, for him, suitable access meaning that he could get in the door, that there was an accessible loo, and crucially that people would actually make us feel welcome and not like we were a bit of a nuisance, particularly with his former colleagues. And remarkably, despite both of us having lived in this city most of our lives, we couldn't come up with one suitable place to go that evening, so instead we stayed at home. And we found, by talking to other disabled people, other friends, that actually this was pretty standard fare. It wasn't just about exciting things like going for a drink with friends, but actually navigating, for example, the post office. How am I going to get to my local post office? Can I get in? Or are they actually going to make me feel welcome and help me do whatever I need to do? And we knew also that these other disabled people had the answers to that question of where we could have gone that night. So Euan and I, after that, embarked on what I would say was some pretty weird and wonderful accessibility experiences, ranging from having been sold accessible tickets to an iconic music venue in Scotland, one of the most iconic music venues to see a gig, and finding we couldn't even get into the space where the band were playing, so we were offered not an insignificant amount of money to go away and tell nobody about the experience. Then, strangely and foolishly, because we were quite a plucky pair, I suppose, given free tickets to a music festival, we thought, we'll give this another go, half expecting that we'd have to turn around and come home, and find it was absolutely brilliant. And yet there were no other visibly disabled people there on that day. So we wanted to share some of these experiences, particularly the positive experiences that we'd had, but more importantly, we wanted to hear from other disabled people, their friends, family members, carers, PAs. Where were they going? Where was good? Where would they recommend? And so we attempted to set up a place for just that. So this slide is some images of Euan on some of these weird and wonderful accessible experiences. Him at said music festival in Pouring in the Rain, but insists that he goes back every year. At his beloved Hibs football ground, and on some work events. So that solution we tried to come up with was Euan's Guide. So a review website that is pretty similar to other review sites, but reviews are written about accessibility and by disabled people and the people they spend time with. Some people say, oh, is it a sort of TripAdvisor for disabled people? In some ways, I guess there are similarities, but I would say it's very much more and often about the everyday in your own town rather than going further afield. When we started this project, the concept of us travelling to a foreign destination was honestly beyond our wildest dreams. We couldn't even navigate trying to get to a local coffee shop with a research project, never mind the idea of going abroad. And maybe to point that out a little bit more as well, from the site and things that people have been posting on the site, Euan's found this fantastic holiday accommodation place and he's going to go back every year. That place is 50 minutes drive away in Fife, and that feels exciting and luxurious. But yeah, some of the things that have come out of it. Some people write essays, some people write just a couple of lines and a few photos. People can say what access equipment they were using. That's voluntary, but most people do. So reviewers can say if they were, for example, a power chair user rather than a manual chair user, if they were using a walking aid, if they were using a symbol cane and walking, etc. As I say, it's voluntary, but I would say almost everybody writes that on their reviews, and that is hugely powerful, so that the person who's reading that content knows the context of the person who's, and the experience of the person who's written that review. I would say that we were hugely naive when we got into this. And then we thought, wow, what's building a website? Yeah, it can't be that hard. Neither of us had any web or development experience. Neither of us had any traditional training or knowledge of accessibility other than our own experiences and from talking to other disabled people and carers and friends of disabled people. We were driven simply by a passion, a belief that this would be helpful for people. I say naive because I don't think we had the faintest idea of how complicated this whole space is, and also how many people impacts. There are 12 million disabled people in the UK, that's about 20% of the population. Nobody seems to talk about that really, and one of our aims, secondary aims of the site is that accessibility becomes mainstream, and when it's such a big part of society, why aren't people mainstreaming this? Yeah, and I would say we're still driven by that passion, that belief that the site will be and is helpful to people, but we now have proof that it is. So users tell us how helpful it is, etc. But a really interesting part of that came out last year, which was we found evidence, and people kept telling us that they were going to new places on the back of just one review. So I don't know how familiar you are with other consumer websites, but normally review websites, people look for maybe a handful, maybe 15, 20, maybe more reviews before saying, hey, I'll try that out. And we're finding that users of Euan's Guide are reading a review that's just a review, no venue information, and they're trying that place. So there's something hugely trusted about that content, and something about it's more powerful than even other user content, that there's something of this sort of community or reading about somebody in a similar situation to me. And I know that from my experiences with Euan, that if we knew another Parcher user had been to Bob's coffee shop along the road, we would think, oh yeah, and he says it's good, yeah, we'll give it a go. So that's quite an exciting thing that's coming out. I'm maybe simplifying it a little bit. But yeah, and let's head to the next slide. Yeah, so where we are now, today, almost 4 years old, and we have almost 6,000 places on the site across 51 countries, most of it, almost all of it in the UK. And that's nice, but we've only really got started. We've got a massive job to do to get much more content on the site to make it the really powerful knowledge bank it could be for people. We have an ambition that every place around every street is reviewed so that you can use Near Me functionality on your phone and find somewhere. You don't have to be doing research every time you plan to go somewhere. But we've got a long way to go, and we need a lot of help with that, so do come and chat to us if you can help us. And we've also got a growing offline community as well, so we'd say Euan's Guide is a place for people to share their experiences of accessibility, to find great places to go, but also take part in what is a growing community and get involved. And yeah, this slide's got a couple of quite random pictures. One of Euan hanging out down at Portobello Beach. I was really just putting this slide up because just to show that Euan is now a Tobii iGaze user. So I'm getting a little bit of interference, I don't know if I should move. It's okay. I imagine you'd expect us to take digital accessibility and make it at the core of what we do, given what we do, and the user base that we have, but also a number of people in our team use assistive tech. So it's very natural for us to think of digital accessibility through everything that we do, from design to development to testing. Testing is the harder part. And the one thing I'd say on that as well is that we've always taken digital accessibility with a view, rarely thinking about standards and really only thinking about the user experience. And for us, we feel sometimes that gets lost, particularly with perhaps bigger organisations where they think, I'm meeting standards, the stuff's fine, right? And they haven't actually tested it with any assistive type users. And the example we would use is say that, so often in the physical environment, somewhere can be technically accessible, but the user experience is terrible. So it can meet all of the standards, and it's a complete nightmare. Anybody who's maybe tried to navigate as a -2 user onto a standard bus marking and a bus space would tell you all about that, or perhaps an accessible loo that's actually filled with bins and nappy changing bins and what have you, which makes it completely redundant. I would check my slides.
I'll try giving a different mic.
Okay.
Sorry, people.
Oh yeah. I'm not sure if it's... Is that better? I think that's fine. Maybe right.
We have someone on the case. We're sorry about that. Enjoy the noise. It's like
Yeah.
contemporary music festival for a second.
And I suppose the last thing I'd say about this slide with Euan and his Toby is, yeah, we've got a super user in the team that is always never holds back in telling us when the stuff isn't working for either. I suppose it's quite good. Early on I'm going to hand over to Paul. Early on in our journey, we met Paul through Twitter. I think about a day later we met, and a few hours later he became a core part of the team. Paul runs all of what we do accessibility-wise and digital accessibility-wise, as well as a number of other projects in the team. So I'm going to hand over to Paul just now.
Always wanted to do this. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Fantastic. Good morning. Quite scary actually looking from this side, because I was sitting over there thinking, oh, yeah, this will be fine, but now I actually sit in this side. It's a bit different. Okay. It's absolutely fantastic to see such strong interest in the world of accessibility. Point 1. I'm going to try and take us on a bit of a journey. Some of this is very spontaneous, so you kind of got to go with the flow a little bit. I'm of an age where I can recall a time where accessibility didn't have a high profile, and disabled people weren't expected to be playing around with technology, the internet and apps. Well, some of that didn't exist. It was a time when nobody would have imagined the coming together of so many platforms to bring about an incredible, but then unimagined set of opportunities that would so enable and so empower disabled people. Back then, a long time ago, people weren't talking about using the simple colours, writing in plain language, describing images, following logical layouts, keyboard only working, good contrast, aligning text, big buttons, captions, shortcuts, or any of that stuff many of us will be familiar with. It was a time when the internet wasn't born. The closest you got to digital technology then was actually the electric typewriter. Oh, how things have changed. I want to spend a few minutes talking about accessibility and some of the learning encountered on what I would describe as the Euans Guide journey. I have to warn you, I'm speaking from notes. I'm quite prone to dropping them, so there might be the odd pause there. I don't propose to use any graphics or illustrations, because that way I can be more spontaneous. I'm not tied into following something that's happening behind me. That's kind of how I'm going to try and do this. You've heard about Euan's Guide, you've heard a little bit about the journey. The other thing, shout at me if the sound drops, because I'm likely to actually get tired on the left-hand side of the microphone and suddenly go, whoa! I want to build upon that journey, I want to build upon that story. And in the spirit of good old-fashioned storytelling, I'm going to share some stories. Each of my stories, I have 7 stories, they're not long, hopefully. Each has its title. And I want to kick off with something people don't often talk about. They talk about the practicalities of inclusive design and various things, which is great, but it's unusual sometimes to actually hear about what does digital accessibility actually feel like. So my first story really is about the time then Team Euan's Guide were planning a night out to celebrate someone's new job. We chose somewhere we thought we would like to go. Strangely enough, being Euan's Guide people, we didn't actually use Euan's Guide to find out somewhere accessible, because we'd heard about this rather up-and-coming, new, trendy sort of place down on the shore. And it sounded great, and sometimes you kind of want to do something different and something a bit new, so it seemed like a good idea. The plans were going well until the reconnaissance phase. You see, because it was somewhere that hadn't been reviewed, and because once in a while you want to try something new, we discovered it had a step. It may, in some people's minds, be only a simple 5-centimetre step, but it was of sufficient size and calibre to stop my power chair and other colleagues dead in their tracks. Imagine how it feels when you get quite excited about joining in the fun, being able to do something that everybody's talking about, and there's a big buzz on social media. Have you been to XYZ? It's absolutely fantastic, and the booze is quite cheap. And so you want to be part of it, and then all of a sudden, 5 centimetres gets in the way. And you see, digital accessibility can feel like that sometimes. Sometimes the website's not clear on its intent. It might not have a range of contact options, and the only one it's offering you is one that's totally inaccessible to you. So you can't ask questions. It might be a site that lacks structure or consistency. So in a way, it's kind of the digital equivalent of my 5-centimetre step. One thing I can tell you is what it feels like, and it's very much like the 5-centimetre step. It sends a really, really clear message to me and many of my friends, and that message is something like this: these guys don't care. But then perhaps I can turn it on its head and think, well, okay, if they don't care, then perhaps I and another 12 million disabled people won't care that much about them. So you see, lesson 1 in the Euan's Guide journey was to understand what it actually feels like not to get into somewhere and not to be able to use a website or an app. My second story is around the notion of perception. Many years ago, it sounds like a history lesson to me. Back in 2007, longer than I choose to remember, my friend Ian and I, point of note here, Ian happens to be a visually impaired person, we set up social enterprise providing website and graphic design services. At the time we were quite unusual because we were a community interest company that employed a team of talented disabled people to deliver the services. We had lots of customers, and we had many potential customers coming through the doors. We won awards, we worked with some high-profile clients, and quite honestly we had a great time. What was really interesting during this time was our customers' interest in accessibility. or more specifically, their perceptions of accessibility. Because sadly, from our point of view, most of those perceptions we encountered very often are seen still today, 10 years later. You see, we encountered many folk who thought that web accessibility was just about visually impaired people. I want to expand on that. I ask you to think about the built environment, because it's a bit like saying that access is all about nice big concrete ramps and big lifts for wheelchair users. That's all very nice, but what about the folk who don't see so well? What about the people with hearing impairments? What about those folk with dementia? What about the ambulant disabled people? And so on. For us, it was an opportunity for members of our team to explain and sometimes demonstrate how rich, deep and inclusive accessibility can be. It was a surprise to many customers, as we never mentioned that their website may be designed by someone who is registered blind, or their graphic design put together by someone who doesn't use a mouse or keyboard. So you see, lesson 2 at Euan's Guide was to talk to the potential audience and find out what their expectations of accessibility were and continue to be. Story 3. I wanted to call this before or after. I'm reminded so often of the many modern buildings I encounter where the notion of design and inclusive design has been overlooked. So much so that you encounter a quick bolt-on of a platform lift here, a cobbled together ramp there, and that kind of becomes the norm. Not always a great solution. Often never tested with disabled visitors, and perhaps not really suitable for the job. The world of accessible websites sometimes feels like that. Many is a time when I and friends have sat and looked at a website and had a conversation around the accessibility. So much so, it's almost like a new game. Showing my age again. So I can recall as a child having small pocket type books. I think they were known as the I Spy books, and the idea was that you use them to tick off things that you'd seen. So there'd be an I Spy book for when you went on train journeys, there'd be an I Spy book for when you went to museums, or for when you went on a car journey. And I kind of, along with friends, wondered, perhaps there's a time for a new I Spy book. It'll be the I Spy book of websites. And imagine the things you'd have to find. Can you find the images with no descriptions? Can you find the buttons with too little contrast? What about something that you can't get at with a keyboard? And so it goes on. So you see, there's really 2 ways of looking at accessibility in my world and my friend's world. There are what we would call the retrofitters, who see accessibility as something that you do because the law says it's a good idea, and it's more seen as a compliance exercise than any thought-out, planned strategy. And then there are those that give me and my friends great hope, as we see that they quite clearly embrace accessibility and inclusion and build it into everything they do as a matter of course. And I kind of have this sense and feeling, and I'm quite upbeat and excited, because I guess there are quite a few of those folks sitting in this room. And so you see, lesson 3 at Euan's Guide was to build accessibility into our website because we wanted to, and not because a directive said we should. Thinking randomly, this is really wildly random, I want to talk about pelican crossings. Here we are in the world of accessibility, and I want to talk about road infrastructure. Really, really topical for Edinburgh, but we won't go down that route. Euan, my visually impaired friend, and I have had long and deep, meaningful debates about the idea of people calling things fully accessible. Pelican crossings. Pelican crossings sometimes get described as fully accessible. But they too have their challenges. It's quite simple. Euan, as a visually impaired person, loves the tactile surfaces and the audio feedback. He knows where to stand, he knows when to cross. On the other hand, for me, as a power chair user, I actually don't really like the tactile surfaces because they shake my chair, which in turn shakes my spine, and so that's not really a great experience for me. So I wouldn't really describe Pelican crossings as fully accessible. Take that example and migrate it across to websites and apps. Sometimes when you do something to enhance the accessibility, you can create barriers for others. I kind of had a sense someone is going to ask me in the break, what did you mean? Have you got an example? So I thought I'd just chuck something in, as you do. Euan uses VoiceOver, or will use Zoom text to read his screen to him, or the components of the screen that he wants read to him. The length of the content of a page in his world is significant. Too long, and he may not stay on the page. So, in his world, short, snappy, well-structured content spread across different pages is fabulous. Whereas miserable old me uses voice command and control. So for me, the minimum number of jumps between pages, buttons, controls, etc. is significant. It feels like hard work. So for me, the content-rich pages, I love them to be as long as I can possibly have them. So you see, there's a little bit of a conflict going on here. In Euan's world, drop-down menus can be, he describes them as being quite verbose sometimes, because people do these hierarchical menus where you've got to wading through and the mid-screen reader wants to read 3 blocks of lists and everything else, and that's problematic. In my world, because I've got to be able to know what it is, it's a cognitive thing. If I can't see it on the screen, I can't click it because I don't know it's there. And I don't go exploring. So there's something else going on there. So you see, you get this real dilemma in that you're trying to invent something that is going to absolutely be 100% for everybody. Forget it. It doesn't exist. It's impossible. I'm going to stop there because I know I'm open to challenge there by saying that, but that's kind of the feeling in the real world. I'm a realist, so we do our best. So lesson 4 at Euan's Guide Towers was to understand that sometimes the things that you do to increase the accessibility and inclusion can have an impact on that very accessibility that you try to create. I've lost count of my stories, but the next one. I want to talk about putting people in boxes. I'm quite passionate about this, but I've limited it a bit because I could actually do a whole PhD on this one. In this world of the accessibility thing, whatever that is, I kind of have this view that people often think sometimes their thinking is framed by impairment or long-term condition. And I strive to encourage people, yes, that's great, but also start to think about functional ability. I say this because we see so many websites that adopt the one-size-fits-all approach. And so they're lulled into thinking about a specific impairment and then they do some accessibility work around there, and it distracts them from taking perhaps a more holistic and inclusive view of the accessibility. I can imagine, I've never been in the world of coding and programming and what it's like at Storm Towers down in Leith, but I can imagine the conversations might be, okay team, let's Let's build a text control that sorts out everything for visually impaired people. Oh yeah, while we're at it, we'll do one of those trendy, colour contrasty, buttony things, and that would be great. And then there's another conversation going on in the other side of the room. Why don't we subscribe to one of those texty reading servicey things that puts a bar at the top and offers you all sorts of accessibility features and stuff like that? Because then, when we've done that, we can forget about all that accessibility nonsense and we can get on with the real work. I would be encouraging developers and designers to think more about human function and human interaction than they perhaps currently do. How people approach that, I'm not quite sure, but I'll share with you the way I tend to think about it is in 4 segments of human function and human interaction. Vision, hearing, physical and motor skills, literacy and learning. And if I kind of think in that quadrant of things, it kind of provides a good starting point as a framework. So lesson 5 at Euan's Guide Towers was to avoid falling into the trap of trying to build accessibility for specific conditions or impairments, but to look more closely at human functions and interactions that may prove challenging for people. I go on a bit, you might have noticed. Shop window or stock room was my next flavour. I wanted to call this shop window or stock room, and here's why. Sometimes people focus on the accessibility of the front end of their website or their app, the perception being that that's where disabled people are going to be found, wanting to come and visit, to come and play, to come and enjoy, etc., to share the experience. I simply have a word of caution. Although I've scribbled that out on here and I've actually changed it to, perhaps it's a word of encouragement. My word of encouragement is not to forget about the stock room at the back. There are some amazing, talented coders, designers, programmers and techie folk out there that just happen to be disabled people. If you're going to create something that's fabulously accessible, then make it accessible to those people involved in the process of creating it, aka the back office. Because you just don't know who might join your team. So lesson 6 at Euan's Guide Towers was to build accessibility and inclusion into our work, but make it integral to absolutely everything we do and think about. For us, one of the most critical areas, which Kiki has spoken about earlier, is what I call testing and trying. When reflecting on the Euan's Guide story and the journey, I can't close without mentioning the testing that goes on. We're constantly tweaking things, as is the way, and each time this happens, there's an ever-growing testing process. There are tools that might be used. There are volunteers that get involved. There are disabled people that get involved. And there are access technology users that get involved. It's a day or two of hands down, loads of donuts, plenty of coffee, and let's just see what happens. See if we can break this new build. That's what it feels like. But occasionally things don't quite work as planned, and adjustments are made. Now and then we meet new users who feedback on what the experience was like using their specific technology or tools. New ideas come forth, suggestions are made, we tweak things, and so the journey goes on. So lesson 7, the last of my lessons, was to test everything as much as you can, with as many folk as you can, and with as many real-life users as you can. And when you do that, don't assume it's all going to work just fine. It doesn't. The journey continues. One thing we are sure of is that the Euan's Guide journey continues as we develop the accessibility of our work, And as technology, the digital world and the aspirations of users changes and grows, so our need to keep a pace will change and grow. One thing we have come to learn, although we did have some insight and a kind of a sense of it, is that the digital world, and in particular the internet, is one of the most accessible forms of delivering information to everyone. And so, with this snapshot of our story and journey, I'm going to bring my storytelling to an end and leave you with 3 key recollections from our experience. The first, users don't always do what you expect, and nor do we. Users don't always interact with technology in the way that you perhaps might imagine, and nor do we. Users can find technology and the accessible digital world to be one of the world's most empowering and liberating experiences. And so do we. And on that note, it's simple. Thank you for listening to my stories. I'll hand back to Kiki.